the budget and the government will be able to succeed if they clearly show their intent in resolving the foundational problems rather than the headlines.
What you will perhaps see is the political priorities getting more and more crystal clear given the new scenario that has emerged post the general elections.
There is a fear that there may be a reskilling tax also which may come in, like a surcharge we had for specific purposes, or a surcharge of 1% or something for reskilling of people who really have to face the AI world more broadly.
Will there be some tilt towards boosting consumption at the bottom of the pyramid? Answer is yes.
The first budget of Modi 3.0, a coalition government this time around. What's the government up against? While manufacturing is going strong at over 58 on the Purchase Managers Index, food inflation is close to 9% and unemployment rate over 9%. A GDP growth rate of over 8%, which although beat most estimates, would not be enough to create the number of jobs that are really required in present circumstances. There is geopolitical unrest that refuses to die down, putting stress on Indian exports. Those are just some of the challenges Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman would be grappling with while putting together this budget. And then there are the challenges of coalition politics. It's a very significant budget in that it would determine how successfully this government can maneuver its vision over the next 5 years.
The reasons why the government has received a mandate below its expectations, the same reasons are the priorities which must be tackled after he has come to power for a third time. What were the reasons? The reasons were that the common person at the bottom of the pyramid is under a huge burden by a compound series of problems. There is, of course, shrinking income, rising prices, rampant unemployment, rural distress, and an unacceptable inequality. So, beyond the euphoric bubble, which we are proud of, that India is the fastest growing economy, there is also another underbelly, another reality where India is the most, probably now, the most unequal society in the world.
I don't quite agree with that formulation, right? If you look at it, you had one of the largest welfare programs that emerged out of COVID, which continues in terms of the food grains.
दुनिया के बड़े बड़े देश नहीं कर पा रहे, लेकिन आज भी भारत 80 करोड़ लोगों को मुफ्त अनाज मुहैया करा रहा है.
You had some really path-breaking efforts on the healthcare front with Jan Aushadhi Kendras, which are very popular, and I know many senior citizens who you use those facilities to get their prescription medicines.
We can definitely expect a big dose of populism, not just because the mandate is fractured, but also because the message across the country is loud and clear. I think government will have to focus on some core issues. The movement towards India, as I call it, which is a developed India, which they have laid out a path till 2047, the development of infrastructure, metros, high-speed railway network, right? But I think the government will have to make this transition soon and quick from India to Bharat now. Right, which means that government will have to move towards the older economy, will have to move towards the agri economy, will have to move towards the rural hinterlands of the country, and perhaps emphasize and stress more on job creation.
Will there be some tilt towards boosting consumption at the bottom of the pyramid? Answer is yes. It could be in the form of higher Manrega allocation if there is a need. It could be in the form of higher allocation for Awas Yojana or healthcare or education, which will benefit rural economy. So my feeling is that it will be vote on account plus kind of budget.
One of the factors that seemingly hurt the BJP in the elections was rising unemployment. Between 2023 and 2024, it has risen from 8% to over 9%. With technology, especially artificial intelligence, changing fast, creating jobs at the pace they are being lost to AI is not going to be easy. Reskilling may be something this government would be compelled to invest into in a big way. India's youth unemployment rate is still amongst the highest in the world.
Till 2047, the kind of economy we are targeting and the kind of targets we have set for ourselves, every year the Indian economy needs to set around 12 to 18 million jobs in a year, right? Even with an 8% kind of a growth rate, we will not be able to do that. We will only perhaps achieve 9 to 10 million jobs a year, right? So we will have to push the pedal on the growth, which means a higher growth rate can only create long-term sustainable jobs. Otherwise, I think this is a vicious circle which the country is fighting for, because the incremental labor force is too huge in a country like ours with a population of almost 145 billion. The incremental labor force is massive, and to provide job and meaningful jobs for all will continue to remain a big challenge, not just for this government but for governments to come in future also. What can government do? Look, my sense is I think government will go all out on this one, because this is the sore point in the economy. This is the most pricking point for the government also, which they are continuously being chased by the opposition parties and other parties in the country. So my sense is government will boost labor intensive manufacturing sectors, will boost a lot of low cost housing and construction kind of jobs in the economy, because those are the sectors which will then perhaps lead to a massive employment opportunities or massive job creation.
The kind of investment that needed to have been made in the skilling sector. You have IITs and IIMs of world class, and in the countryside, in many states, you have primary education, where if there is a school, there is no teacher, or if there is a teacher, there is no building. Institutes of mediocrity, producing millions of graduates who are unemployable, and not enough emphasis on vocational training of a good quality for skilling.
There's a fear that there may be a reskilling tax also which may come in, like a surcharge we had for specific purposes, or a surcharge of 1% or something for reskilling of people who really have to face the AI world more boldly. So how will that all pan out? That we'll see in the budget, but there's a need to create jobs. Otherwise, I think our manpower is going to be up against arms and ours in some years. So that is a very important part. So that, I think, is something which will happen through the budget in a big way, in a very, very big way.
We have to tackle these two things on two parts. One, providing skill. For example, in Odisha, Kenderpada, a plumbing institute was set up. Now that's creating professional plumbers, and they are catering not only to India but also globally. In Northeast India, we are encouraging Japanese language and culture institutes. They are creating blue-collar workers for Japan who can speak in some portion their language and understand their culture. These are the kind of activity which we have to create for blue-collar workers, and at the same time focus on white-collar workers through appropriate skills in accounting, audit, taxation, computing, and so on and so forth. Creating right skills for the jobs of the future will be priority in this budget.
Some very interesting ideas have emerged, for example, from Andhra Pradesh, where you're trying to steer the discussion away from a regressive caste census to something progressive called a skills census.
The production-linked incentive scheme that has witnessed considerable amount of success in electronics manufacturing and pharma APIs is likely to see a revamp. Seemingly, discussions are on to include more sectors. Likely emphasis may be on sectors that are labor intensive this time around. Textiles, footwear, handicrafts, those are some that come to mind. The scheme should be tweaked to include those industries that have more linkages to micro, small and medium enterprises. Next frontier sectors such as space tech may be on the government's radar as well.
Undoubtedly, the success of electronics, mobile phones should be replicated in other sectors. For the first time in 3 decades, India started making penicillin thanks to PLI for APIs and bulk drugs. There are certain segments which can employ lot of labor, which can create lot of manual jobs. For example, garmenting. Today, countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Sri Lanka are ahead of India in garmenting. China is way ahead of India in garmenting. How do I create incentivization for Indian fabric makers to be a garment manufacturer? A PLI scheme for a labor-intensive industry like garmenting will be more appropriate.
I don't know if they'll add more sectors, but I'm sure there are lessons to be learned, and which sectors it has worked well, which it hasn't worked enough, and what else needs to be done. Take the case of semiconductor manufacturing, right? I mean, we've just had 2 or 3 proposals that have gotten off the ground. I think there's a lot more scope there, but of course, the challenge there is how do you create enough sufficient demand so that you're competitive against other countries which are also putting in significant amounts behind semiconductor manufacturing. Consumer electronics, clearly we have made a headway. We need to do similar. We need to find similar sweet spots in these other sectors.
Tackling unemployment in India is a case for a multi-pronged approach. There is rural unemployment that poses challenges that are completely distinct from urban unemployment. Let's look at urban unemployment first. The government, most of them in the past, have come out with schemes for those at the bottom of the pyramid. They have seen considerable amount of success as well. There have been very few in the white-collar job segments. That's the category that's mostly losing out to AI. One way forward could be expansion of global capability centers. It's obviously a challenge that would be met as much by the government as by private enterprise.
You need a skills program, and you need the ability to acquire those skills in a reasonable way to be able to be competitive and participate in the economy. I think that is the way forward. I don't think the government can create all the jobs, but the government can create the necessary conditions for these jobs to emerge.
Everybody is looking India for GCCs, and everybody is looking at India for shifting some processes, lots of jobs to India, which is happening as we talk, and they are bigger than the Indian IT companies. But there also there is disruption happening. I mean, in the sense, how many of that 1 lakh people employed in one GCC be required after 3 years? Will they be outdriven by technology? Will they be outdriven by processes, and many will be laid off? The challenges which the IT companies are facing today to reskill into AI, and they don't need so many people, will soon get into GCC also.
Ultimately, we have to find a balance between industries in the cutting areas of technology, which are less labor intensive, and sources of employment which utilize our demographic dividend.